This is a video of the difference between the Chinese chess and Korean chess, which is also known as Xiangqi and Janggi. So let's get into the difference. So the board initially sets up like this, and you may notice there's like one difference so far. So for Chinese chess like Xiangqi, the general pieces like these ones in the middle are starting on the back row like that. But for Janggi, which is Korean chess, these generals that are the biggest pieces of the board start in the center of each fortresses. Okay, that's a little odd, but that's one difference of the setup from both games. And the characters are a little different. Some of them may be the same, but all of them may be different. And now let's get into the moves. So let's start off with the generals. I'll show you both generals from Chinese chess. So you could see it's black versus red in Chinese chess. And in Chinese chess, red goes first, right? And I'll show you the Korean ones. The Chinese characters look different. That is because it's differentiating from China to Korea. So these are all the generals. In Chinese chess, generals move one space orthogonally, which meaning forwards, backwards, left or right. And besides, the generals may not leave the fortress, so they're confined with 9 points. That is marked with the diagonal lines that forms the X. And they can only move like this, but they cannot move along the diagonal like that. They cannot do that. And also they cannot leave the fortress, as I said before. So they're confined with 9 points. But for the Korean chess, the difference is, although they can still move one space orthogonally within the fortress, but they actually have an option to move along the diagonal lines of the fortress as well. If there's a diagonal line, they can move like this, but if there's not a diagonal line, they can't move like that way. Can't do that. You have to follow along the line to make a correct move. And it's the same for this guy here. They can move along the lines. And again, same as Chinese chess, they cannot leave the fortress. And next piece are the advisors. So it's these guys. Notice that the red has an extra mark differentiating from the black. And what the advisors do in Chinese chess, they can only move one space diagonally within the fortress. So it moves like along the diagonal lines of the fortress. And unlike the general, they cannot move one space orthogonally. They cannot make that move. They only move one space diagonally. And like the general, they cannot leave the fortress either. And if they only move one space diagonally, they are confined with 5 board positions. Really rather a weak piece, aren't they? So those 3 guys for each player, they cannot leave the fortress. But in Janggi, or Korean chess, the advisors actually have the exact same move as the general in Korean chess. So they can actually move along the lines in the fortress, and again, they cannot leave the fortress. So they can move along the lines, and again, if there's not a diagonal line like this, they can't move like that. They have to always follow along the line like the general. So, the differences so far between Chinese and Korean chess, generals only move along the orthogonal lines, while advisors in Chinese chess move along the diagonal lines only. But in Korean chess, both generals and advisors have moved the same way. So that's generals and advisors. Next, we'll move on to the chariots that are rooks. So again, you could see an extra mark that differentiates from the black on the red, just like the advisors. Oh, I forgot to show you the advisors on the Korean chess. They both of the Chinese characters have the same. Anyway, let's get to the chariots. And from Korean chess, these are what the chariots look like. But notice that the green side has like a cursive form of that, or simplified Chinese characters. So like chess, the rooks can move along a straight line any number of spaces as far as they like, vertically or horizontally, as long as they don't run into another piece. But unless capturing like so, that is where they stop. In Korean chess, they do the same. Move any straight lines in as far as they like until they reach another piece to capture, and that is where they have to stop. However, there's a difference that I found. So let's say this rook here, when they're inside the fortress, they can also have the option of moving along the diagonal lines of the fortress. So their movement must start and end within the fortress. So from here, they cannot move further than that corner of the fortress. So let's say move up here. They can't move that way. They can only move up to here. And they can still move any number of spaces along the straight line, like the rook. So that's like an interesting addition to rooks. But in Chinese chess, chariots cannot move like that. So see here, if I could place my rook over here, the chariots, they don't actually have an option to move along the diagonal lines. They always move orthogonally. Yeah, pretty odd, but this is how Chinese chess works. Now let's get into the cannons. So here are the cannon pieces, and the symbols are different. The black is used for as catapults, which means a cannon is packed with boulders, and the red piece is like the Chinese character symbolizes fire, so it shoots fire. Does it make sense? Red is fire and black is boulder. Anyway, both of them are same. And in Chinese chess, they move like the rook when they just not capturing, right? Wow, they also move like a rook. However, when they want to make a capture, they need another piece just to make a capture. So let's say I have both of these, and my enemy piece is right there. They can jump over and capture it. And when jumping over, they always have to capture an enemy piece. They cannot jump over and land on vacant points. So that's considered an illegal move. And also they cannot jump over two pieces to make a capture. So from here, I cannot capture this one because that's jumping over two pieces. But I can jump over one piece to capture this one. Alright, so it moves like a rook when not capturing, but if it wants to capture, it must require exactly one intervening piece along the line to capture. But in Korean chess, I'll show you, these are the two pieces, green one and the red one. They move differently, so in order for them to move, they need one intervening piece just to make a move or capture. So it's different from Chinese chess. Let's say I move this piece here. Let's demonstrate this one. They jump over like this. That's one move, like that. And capturing, they can capture like this. And just like Chinese chess, they cannot jump over two pieces. Let's say like this one, for instance. I cannot make this cannon capture this piece because that's jumping over two pieces, but I can jump over and capture this one because that's just jumping over one piece. However, there's a difference. If cannons need an intervening piece just to make a move, they cannot start off like in Chinese chess, they can move on their own. No, you can't move your cannon like that. They can't move on their own like the rook. So that's different from Chinese chess. Needs one intervening piece to make a move. However, there's two special rules about cannons, is that a cannon cannot jump over another cannon. So see here, jump over this cannon and capture this guy's horse. No way, you're not allowed, take it back. And another thing, second rule, is that a cannon cannot capture another cannon. So I move my piece over and capture this guy's cannon. You can't do it because it's a cannon you cannot jump over. So for instance, this cannon can jump over and land on this point, or on this point, or this point, but cannot land on that cannon because that's a cannon you cannot capture. So cannons are immune to each other from capturing and jumping over. Very strange difference. In Chinese chess, you can do any of those things, but in Korean chess, you can't. Next, we got horses that are equivalent to knights in Western chess. So here are the knight pieces from Chinese chess. Again, you have the extra mark for the red one. And here we have the knight pieces for Korean chess. The green one's pretty different, right? And surprisingly, these pieces on both games, they move exactly the same. And there's no difference at all to explain. Let me tell you the moves in case you don't know. So they move one space orthogonally, followed by one space diagonally. It's like the knight's move, right? Same thing as Korean chess, like this. However, horses can be blocked. So when, for instance, this piece like that is in the way, I cannot go past it and land onto this point or on this point. But I can move to this point because there's no intervening piece right there. And same situation as this one in Korean chess. It's blocked off by this piece in front, so it cannot move to this point or this point. But it can move here. Exactly the same. And next we have elephants. So here are both pieces in Chinese chess. And you notice both of these pieces on red and black are different. The black piece is actually an elephant, but the red piece is actually translates minister. But still they are both the same movements. In Chinese chess, they move exactly two spaces diagonally, no more or less. So they can move here. They can actually be blocked by an intervening point. So if this, let's see, this piece is here, this elephant cannot go there because this horse is blocking the way. And something strange, elephants cannot go over the river. So this is the river on the board in Chinese chess, where you see a group of squares that are arranged horizontally are connected. These lines don't go through. That's called a river. And which means each elephants are restricted to 7 board positions. So if you don't believe me, I'll count for you. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you notice that both elephants are connected to each other. And same thing for these guys too. And if that's the case, these opposing elephants cannot quite get to each other. They're actually immune to each other because either of them cannot go over the river. they can be trapped very easily, but they can be sneaky somehow. And now for the elephants in the Korean chess. And their movements are way different from Chinese chess. So it moves one space orthogonally like the knight, followed by two spaces diagonally. So it's like the extended knight's move by one extra space diagonally, right? One space along the line and then two spaces diagonally. So that means they can possibly move anywhere in any points. They're no longer restricted to certain number of board positions. So same thing for this green piece, one space along the line, then two spaces diagonally. And like the knights, elephants can be blocked too. So let's say when this piece is in the way, this elephant here cannot move to that point there because it's blocked by this horse piece. And also another thing, it can also happens to be obstructed in the middle of the path. So although if this point is clear, this elephant can move to that spot, but cannot move here because of this cannon. Because see here, although it's clear one space orthogonally like that, but if you want to move this way, it can't because the cannon's blocking its path. So there's two possible positions that elephants can be blocked on a direction. Pretty strange. And finally, we move on to soldiers that are pawns. So here are the pawn pieces from Chinese chess and pawn pieces from Korean chess. Notice that they have the same Chinese characters. Every red pieces have the same Chinese character. The pieces between black and green, they're same too. There's major differences to follow. In Chinese chess, soldiers move one space forward. They only move forward. And when they're still inside their own territory, they only move one space forward. However, once they cross the river, not only they can move forward one space, but they can also move one space to either side. Very interesting, right? And when they don't actually, unlike chess, they don't capture diagonally, so they just capture the same way as they move. And when they get to the end of the board like this, they don't actually promote like in chess, they just move sideways. And of course, the only direction they cannot move is backwards. Pawns don't usually go back, do they? Okay, so that's how the pawns move in Chinese chess. Now I'm going to show you pawns in Korean chess. The difference is pawns can start moving one space forward or sideways. That's right, they can start moving sideways. Because in Korean chess, you notice there's no river on Korean chess like Chinese chess. So pawns can actually start moving forward or sideways one space, and same thing for the green side. But there's one special thing. When the pawn actually reaches within the fortress, they can also move the diagonal lines of the fortress. See here? Not only move forward one space or one space to either side, they can also move one space along the diagonal lines. And this is also putting in check the same way. And if it's like this, they have a grand total of 5 different directions to move. And once again, like Chinese chess, when they reach the end of the board, they don't promote, instead move sideways. Oh yes, I forgot one thing. The cannons also move along the diagonal lines of the fortress as well, so starting from one corner to the other, they can jump over for the general, for example, and land on the other side. They can move along the diagonal lines. And in Chinese chess, cannons cannot do that. And in Chinese chess, pawns cannot move the diagonal lines either. So that's all of the difference for the moves. Now for the one last difference is that the setup. In Korean chess, before the game starts, players have the option to swap both the horse and the elephants around in the adjacent points, like this. Or one or both, or the other side only. The other player has the option too. However, there's obviously one restriction to remember. Players actually cannot start with both elephants on one side and both horses on the right. That doesn't look fair at all. Just each side must have one elephant and one horse, and that's it. And after doing that, the game starts. That way, it can enable elephants to move one space orthogonally, then 2 spaces diagonally on the first move, like that. But in Chinese chess, you can't because it always stays like this. Alright, so that's wraps it up for the difference between Chinese chess and Korean chess. I hope you find it interesting. Thank you for watching.